I'll start. So welcome to this week's live Culture and Wellbeing Live. This week we are joined by Kathleen and Paula, who will introduce themselves very shortly on the theme of social isolation. So Kathleen, do you want to introduce yourself quite briefly?
Oh, yes, hello everyone. I'm Kathleen Milne. I'm the library's manager for the Western Isles. Originally from South Africa. You'll notice I do have a kind of Scottish accent, but my grandfather was born in Scotland, so it feels like home to me now.
You've been there a long time now, so.
Yes, I have.
Awesome. And Paula?
Hello, I'm Paula Brown. I'm living in very rural Aberdeenshire at the moment. I lived on the Western Isles for 5 years, which is where I know Kathleen and Lewis from. I was working in Atlanta there, working on a dementia project. At the moment, I'm working freelance for the DEEP Network, which is the Dementia Engagement and Empowerment Project, which is national, and also Life Changes Trust, which is across Scotland. I'm a freelance facilitator. I think that'll do for now.
Awesome. Yes, and it's a great connection because this is based on our work with Science Ceilidh, is how we got connected with both Kathleen and Paula to begin with on a project looking at the benefits of bilingualism and lots of beautiful singing in Gaelic and bringing people together in the libraries, and that's overlapped with Fun Palace as well. We'll talk a wee bit about that as we go on. But the theme of today is tackling social isolation. I think there's going to be lots of discussion about this, especially now, but I think one of the themes we're going to talk about is this has always been an issue and will remain to be an issue, so it'll be interesting to see how things develop given the COVID crisis. In terms of just what's happening today, this live conversation is going to be posted at 1 o'clock as a watch party. If you're watching now, please do say hello. This has been pre-recorded, so both Kathleen and Paula will probably be on the watch party and be able to comment as you're going along. So any questions, please do interact on the video. And then after the video, or if you're just watching this offline anyway, there's an event, Facebook event, where we're going to have a discussion, a text-based discussion as well. And what I'll do over the course of the hour after this video is done is post probably about 4 questions where everyone can just, on each of the threads, just make their own comments as well. So that way we can feed in all the different conversations. And again, that's a resource for everyone to access, to add to whenever. You will have noticed also on the Facebook, I've had lots of alerts this week, I'm afraid, but I've reorganized a lot of things into units, which are on the left side of the Facebook group. And if you go into the unit section, I've then planned, organize everything into sections. So that way we're kind of highlighting the key resources, because I know the discussion isn't the best way to organize things. So hopefully that will continue. So with that in mind, we'll start off with Kathleen. And you've already introduced a bit about yourself, but maybe do you want to talk a bit more about the work that the Western Isles libraries do and how that interacts with social isolation?
Yes, definitely. Well, just to say a bit about the Western Isles, in case some people don't know, it is an archipelago of islands, and it's about 200 kilometers in length, so quite a far way from the top to the bottom. It's got a population around 26,500 and really remote rural sort of the coverage and the way people live. So we have 4 branch libraries, so that's in Stornoway, Tarbert, Linnaclet and Castle Bay, so that sort of covers the whole area, and 2 mobile libraries, and sort of it's, you know, through both of those we sort of try and deliver the service to everybody, the whole community, through those services. We've actually just about to launch new mobile libraries, but COVID has interrupted that, so they're still waiting to be launched to the community. Yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a key aspect is always libraries are more about the book, more than just books as well.
Absolutely. I mean, even though Stornoway, the one library in Stornoway, is our biggest library, all the branches have a very sort of community feel about them. It's a very sort of responsive relationship, and we depend a lot on sort of local staff who have such a great knowledge and a sort of fantastic relationship with the communities. And that's extended through the mobile libraries into the communities. Because the mobiles actually visit households, every household. It's not where it visits a sort of central location in each area and people come to it, because houses are so spread apart. They visit each home and they visit nurseries, schools, care homes, they're the contact, they're our contact between the branch library and every single community. The only island we don't have that on is Barra, unfortunately, which is quite small, but yeah, it would still be nice to have that house to house, in addition to a really vibrant branch library there as well.
I'm sure you're working on it.
We are. Yeah, and I mean, as you say, it's not just books. That is the core of the service, but it's to provide information, connection to cultural information and inquiries. We're looking more and more to expand our sort of digital offer and maybe provide some kind of digital engagement sessions on the mobiles, and maybe have some work closer with the museum, more of their collections available, sort of on 3D to share. So we just we connect, we connect community with so much else, information, whatever they need really. And we couldn't do what we do if we weren't working with organizations. And we mentioned Paula and I, it was through Paula that we got the memory boxes on the mobiles. Paula helped develop those as part of her work in Atlanta, and those are sort of reminiscence collections, which we get to people and carers through the mobiles. And yeah, I mean, through her, we've done quite a lot of other sort of partnership working. I think we've just got a grant from Life Changes Trust as well. I think Paul on that photographic project we were talking about, which is to sort of collate and create a collection of local photographs to use in reminiscence work. So really excited about that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Really good.
Oh yeah, Paula, come.
Can I just say that just to add a little bit of colour to what Kathleen's saying there, we actually recorded a news piece in the front of the library once. We've been there to watch films. We've had a science Kaylee in the library before. We've Kathleen actually digitally printed with her team some things for the memory boxes of some of the local pottery, with all of that amazing tech that's available there in the library. And we've had so many events there that it really has been, the heart of a lot of the project work. And partnership working really does mean that you sort of have more than the sum of its parts, that you really actually create something extra apart from what you both contribute. And the memory boxes really came from the people in the community for the people in the community. People in the community actually donated things to the memory boxes, and the very first one that we made was a sensory memory box for people who are really at the end of their lives and nursed in bed. And those people contributed by responding to the items that we gave them to touch and feel. And that actually informed what was put in the box as to what people really enjoyed. We had sort of hand massage and lights and colours and smells and textures and Harris tweed and things that would feel really good in your hands. And being able to hold something taps into haptic memory, it taps into muscle memory, and all of the research that we'd found. And people were just naturally offering this to us in their collections that they gave us and responded to. So there's so much that the library has offered to the partnership working and the community. It's been really wonderful. I just have some really happy times at the library with lots of really interesting people.
No, absolutely. And I think, what always struck me when, so again, Paula connected me to Kathleen originally, and then, that connection point is so vital. And then when you talk about the mobile libraries, for example, you've talked about instances where there are members of the community, especially more remote, who the mobile librarian, it might be the only people they might see. And obviously things like cuts to councils and things like that, that has a really massive effect, because if you go from every 2 or 3 weeks to more than that, you're really, it's feeding into social isolation even more. And I guess, I think, did you want to talk about that?
Absolutely, because in Lewis and Harris, we have had to move from a 3-week rota to a 4-week rota. And we know there are I don't know how many households, but a few, where the mobile librarian is the only person some people see in 4 weeks. So that contact, it's not just about providing the service of books, that contact is so much more. It's the social contact, but it's also the person has choice over the books. They're able to come in, they may be able to make a choice. And I think that choice and that physical interaction is so important. And I think someone else put it away by, even if the people aren't visiting their neighbours, if they're far apart, by the mobile library going from one house to the next, that's forming those connections as well. And I love that picture as well. So yeah, so I think we're really conscious that every 4 weeks is not a lot, but let's think of ways of how we can maximize that. And what you were both saying is, like, when you work in partnership, it's so much more than the sum of the two parts, because those connections, you know, that Paula, you gave with you, Lewis, that's going on in so many different projects. I think we've got about 3 or 4 projects that are now stemmed from that first interaction. So it's just fantastic. We couldn't do what we do in isolation, so it's working with people.
And well, I mean, it must be said as well, I think, you know, it also needs champions within libraries. You know, so there's such a key important staff to be able to work with, so that's so vital. How is that work then being affected by COVID? So in terms of the mobile libraries or the services, I think
yeah, it is really hard. We do have some staff who are having to social, you know, isolate. Some staff might be redeployed, but we haven't really heard anything yet. But we are now sort of pushed into doing more and more online. And we're a very small staff, and, you know, we don't have teams to work on these specialist services. So it's been a learning curve. We have been working with social media, but we've had to jump into doing sort of online story time, online reading. So we're learning masses. There's a sort of small team working on that. We've got Saturday story time. And we've got Lego challenges every week, which have been really popular. Yes, the online reading groups are going to start coding challenges. At the same time, we're trying to make it much easier for people to join. We've got ebooks and e-audio books, so we're really trying to promote them. We've got online information resources, really trying to promote that. We've been so lucky in that through Paula again, we had a collection of 10 tablets, which were our memory tablets. But we've just given those, loaned them to Alzheimer's Scotland, so they can sort of use them to support people. And we've signed up to Devices.now. I don't know if you've heard of that project, which the Good Things Foundation is managing. And we've just received 10 devices, which we can then pass on to vulnerable adults who may not have digital access or Wi-Fi. So we're doing that at the moment. So that at least will keep some people connected that wouldn't be able to otherwise. But I still have this concern about what about people who don't want to or don't feel comfortable with being digital, you know, going online. How are we going to sort of help them? But the community work here is amazing. Community-led support and the local trusts and community associations are doing so much, and we're sort of working more and more with them. So the word is spreading, and you know, yeah. I just think we'll be learning a lot from this process and how we sort of respond to the needs in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess 2 very quick follow-on questions on that. So I guess one is with the technology services, so providing the iPads. How do you have an idea of how you're going to target that? Is that going to be by words of mouth or?
Yes, well, we have sort of already identified people in need, and that was working with our sort of the partners we had links with in our community groups we had link with in, you know, in the past. Mm-hmm. So I think the difficult thing is that we have so many more than 10. It's how do you identify the 10 most in need? I suppose we can only do what we can, and then hopefully we'll be able to access some more in the future to sort of get that out to other people.
Yeah. Mm. And I guess the second thing there is yeah, I think that's a big theme of today, is that partnership. So social isolation is, finding people who already work with specific communities, because I think building that relationship is very hard. And that's, again, why bringing libraries into the mix with other social services, community trusts and things like that, hopefully by overlapping, fewer and fewer people are going to get left out, even if they are digitally excluded.
That's it, yes. And I think that's, again, you mentioned sort of cuts to services, and it is a worry because libraries are an easy target.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some organizations that are absolutely aware of the role that libraries play, but yes, I do worry about the future. If they're getting more and more cut, mm-hmm. there is going to be a gap. At the moment, the focus really should be on outreach and us getting out to people, mm-hmm. like the mobiles do, but we're less and less able to do that. And yes, it's what Paula said again. It's like by working together, you get so much more out of it, but you need those partnerships. You need those places there to be able to form those partnerships. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
So what about, well, actually one of the things we were hoping to do together, actually one of these partnerships that developed was with engaging libraries. And I suppose that was looking at libraries as a space for public engagement with research. And I mentioned that social isolation, this is probably isn't the last time we're going to look at social isolation because it's such a big theme. It's also quite interesting to bring in researchers in as well. And we're hoping to work with Dr. Sarah Ann Munoz, I think, correct me if I pronounce that incorrectly, from the University of Highlands and Islands, looking at how we can tie in research and how people could engage with that on a public sense, but also feed into it as well. And so I think it would be interesting to see how we can kind of rearrange that given the circumstance where I think the need is even more, though obviously we can't meet as much.
That's it. It will be very interesting. And I think there will definitely be ways once we start talking further about it, how we can link in with these partners that we're working with already, community-led support and the trusts, because people now have a sort of so much more dynamic. I mean, they're always working very closely with their communities, but yeah, there will be ways we can do this slightly differently.
Yes,
and then when it's all over, seamlessly.
Well, I think this might be the case for a while. I think there might, a lot of projections suggesting there's going to be, I think, peaks and troughs and isolation periods for maybe a while. So I think getting used to that kind of format, and as and certainly maybe one of the questions we have at anyone watching is what resources will be useful. There is a wealth of research going on even right now, but there's a general wealth of research going on about the value of culture for social isolation, different mechanisms. And so one of the parts of the project is to develop resources, and something that this network can absolutely feed into. So if you have any thoughts about what would be useful, whether that's, accessible summaries, whether it's kind of Paula's ideas around actually linking this into toolboxes that, that people can rent or something, or care packages that people can use, any ideas like that, it would be super helpful.
I think it will be interesting because maybe it's, instead of us, we're doing the online story times, we're doing this, what we mean to be looking at, and I think we will be, is people then working with us. So people contributing to all these things as well. So it could be our kind of Life Changes Trust project as well. It could be engaging libraries, but start the whole conversation off by engaging with people and getting people to have devices and using them, to interact with these projects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe one last thing to mention as well is that I know there is a national campaign right now called No One Left Behind, which is to try and get everyone on board digitally as well, and seeing this as an opportunity. Yes, there is an exclusion. Yes, there are people who prefer not to be online, but seeing this as an opportunity is actually, can we support digital champions in communities, and can we actually get people online and use this as the opportunity to develop digital skills? And again, libraries and cultural organizations and community workers are absolutely the best place people to do this. They can identify those needs. So I'll post a link on that as well for people to see. One last point before we talk to Paula is around, so you've been involved in Fun Palace as well. So you ran two, in fact, or the Western Isles Libraries ran two. And I think there's some quite interesting learning about the difference between the two and what you felt like would work. And and some of the challenges. So do you mind talking a wee bit about that?
No, it was, well, we really enjoyed it. We had one in Stornoway and one in Llanaclet, which is on the Isle of Benbecula. And it was kind of what we thought, even though Stornoway is a town, we weren't quite sure how well it would work there, because it was going out to the community to sort of ask them to share skills, come in and share those kind of skills. And it ended up at Stornoway being mostly library staff in sort of on an off-day mode, but very much sort of library staff doing that. And then Lancia were there doing some activities, but we got no one really from the public to come in and engage. But at Llanaclet, it was completely different. Now, the library in Llanaclet isn't in the town of Llanaclet, it's just part of the school, so there's nothing else around it. And yet there must have been at least 10 different tables at the library with people running their own sort of activities and workshops. It was evidently a buzz. There were so many people coming and engaging, and it was just the difference the library made in that more isolated area. And people just sort of came. There was someone teaching someone about whale bones and dolphin bones and things like that. There was someone doing felting. There was someone else doing botanical art, someone doing coding. So it was amazing. It so succeeded at what it was supposed to be. And it's just the thing is that different things work in different communities. There's never one thing fits all. And I think, you know, we're learning that over the time, you know, over years, that sometimes it's no point having something in Stornoway. It's more sort of shopping area, and then people go home, and then they maybe don't want to come out so much. But in Llanaclet, you know, the community was there. It was wonderful.
And yeah, and it's I guess one thing we always say about Fun Palaces is it's never about the numbers, and I think that's particularly this year. We don't know what's going to happen with Fun Palaces, but we're really going to focus on the tiny. It is about that, really highlighting what expertise communities already have, and even if one or two people turn up, but everyone who's involved in making shares new skills and makes new connections, that for us is the real value. But that said, yes, I think it's really interesting with that kind of dynamic and trying to get people involved. Maybe more community members involved with the Stornoway one, perhaps, and
that's it.
Yeah, but it's just that kind of sense of takeover, and particularly in the social isolation. And I think we're looking at small connections, and that's the way to forward.
And I think we'll start earlier. We'll start sort of working with more groups and organisations, so we spread out the word that way. Yeah, maybe working. We'll try a different tack this year and see what happens. Yeah,
that's awesome. Paula, did you want to ask anything to Kathleen?
No, I just love that the Fun Palaces work so well in Llanaclet. You know, I can picture it well, having been there and run events there, and the community is just wonderful. You might think that a small area doesn't have the resources or the community engagement, but wow, they really do. One of the problems that I've come up against is in care centres, often you don't have access to tablets, as Kathleen was just talking about just then. But actually, one of the best resource places I've been to is the tiny care home called Sacred Heart in South Uist. They've actually got a room for computers for people to contact their relatives on. They've just had it sorted for years, you know. You wouldn't really maybe expect that from, you know, the South Uist care home. That would be the one place that actually had everything in place. But I was just completely amazed by it and really happy to see that.
But it does make sense too. I think there's, you know, a lot of the work on. I was always impressed by things like East Skull, for example, which is East School in Gaelic. You know, and where a lot of high school students might not have access because the schools are much smaller to specific subjects, so they do it on a kind of regional level, and so they've been distance learning for a long time, and you know, now it's kind of bringing in that expertise. And as I say, it'll be interesting to see what happens afterwards, to see if that continues. And maybe a big issue with the Fun Palace aspect as well is also, again, we're trying to move away from delivery, and very often it's hard to sell to people as something like this is something that anyone can do and be a maker and be an active participant for. And it's trying to communicate that. And in places like in Benbecula, maybe there's just more of it's being communicated better, or there's more of a people feel more confident just to share
Mm.
smaller communities. Whereas again, if people are in the mindset always of like, oh, this is an workshop for an expert who's going to run it, you know, if they're always in audience mode, trying to move that away, and it does take time, and it's okay if it takes time, but it's difficult to communicate.
I think across the islands, the Ceilidh culture really helps with that, because if you go to a Ceilidh, you are expected to bring your talent with you. You're expected to know a story or a song. So I think that's quite embedded in the culture in the Western Isles, that really you are expected to do your bit, you know, bring the party.
Bring the party.
Yeah. And it's spreading that to other things like sort of science, STEM, you know, sort of accessible scientific sort of projects and that, and crafts. I think a lot of the success with the Fun Palace was down to the library as well, because they have a regular textile group. So people are coming in and used to be sharing and do a lot of things anyway. And Paula said, it's that sharing, storytelling basis of the community and interaction that's at the heart of it. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Also with skills, I found that when I was in a care centre, we took a cyanotype workshop there, and we were using UV light because the sun wasn't out. We were using a light box, and we were talking to one of the ladies there, and she was saying, well, of course, I used to be a radiographer. So there are talents and skills in everybody that, you know, you might not expect, but it just pops up in these wonderful ways, and there are skills that can be shared immediately in that moment, which is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just that, you know, everyone has those things, stories, and those that history and the skill set, that it's just about giving people that symbolic permission that this is valuable. It is valuable. It's really rich and important, especially times like now, to help us connect. And actually, I have heard, you know, if people are making phone calls for things, one of the challenges that people are having is, what do you talk about? You know, for befriending services online, the phone. So TV is always good, because a lot of people are accessing TV right now. But I think it is asking these questions to people right now, is how to make those social connections, is what, you know, asking what do people used to do, and teaching you a couple lines of language or facts about chemical engineering, because there used to be a chemist once, or, you know, whatever it would be. Yeah. Great. Well, that moves us really nicely on to working with more older communities and people with dementia. So Paula, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe talk a bit more about what you do with those lots of different hats?
What do I do? I wonder that myself quite often. I'm working for 2 organisations freelance at the moment, mostly. I have other little side projects as well, but one of my posts is freelance working for DEEP, which is their Dementia Engagement and Empowerment Project. That's their website is dementiavoices.org.uk. Dementia Engagement and Empowerment Project. It's basically small groups of people gathering who have dementia, and they might gather just for friendship and for that connection of having something in common, and having people around them who understand some of the things that they're going through, because I think every person who has dementia is going to experience it differently, and there are over 100 different kinds of dementia. So, you know, there's just so many different ways to experience this situation. But if you have people around you who have a similar situation happening for them as well, you've got that group around you, that dementia family, as some people call it. So that small groups who meet either for friendship or for understanding, or to actually change things. And some of the groups are actually changing things by making their own resources. You'll find that some people have created resources for using Zoom or how to self-manage. One of the groups that I'm working with is called the Alumni, and they've all had dementia for over 10 years. So there's a wealth of experience there. They've done an awful lot of campaigning. They originally set up so that they could support people with a new diagnosis. But they actually found that the collective experience that they have was just really useful for peer support resources. And they've been making these wonderful publications, and you know, there's one that we're working on to launch digitally. And actually this COVID situation hasn't really affected that too much, because we can still launch that digitally, and so we're working on that together. by email and by phone and by Zoom calls. So that work goes on. So that's actually been fine. But the other organisation that I'm working with, Kathleen's already mentioned, Life Changes Trust. They've got two streams to their work. One stream is for care experienced young people, and the other stream is for people who are affected by dementia. And their website is lifechangestrust.org.uk. And if you look on the section there, you'll see local supported funded projects. And my freelance work with them is actually about supporting the facilitators or project managers of locally funded projects in Grampian. So I'm sort of taking a different angle at it there. I'm actually supporting the people who run the projects. I've got 5 years of running a Life Changes Trust funded project myself at Atlanta and Stornoway. So I feel quite well placed to support them. So we have Zoom meetings. Originally, I was going to be meeting everybody in person, but that hasn't really happened at the moment. It will happen. I've got this post for 18 months, so that will happen. But equally with the deep groups, I would have been gathering people and supporting them to have their gatherings and talk about what they find important to them and what the things that they want to change. But instead, we're just kind of meeting online, really. That's all we can do at the moment. But I'm finding other ways to keep in touch with people. I've been making postcards and, writing letters, going back to writing letters. All of these things are important, and maybe we've forgotten how to do a lot of these things. So I'm thinking that although this is a terrible situation, and, you can't really get away from the fact that this is a really big deal. But I think that there's a lot of positive that can come from it, because the things that we're learning to do now, we're actually able to maybe continue in the future. The digital connections that we're working on, hopefully if people are starting that for the first time now and just learning to use it, they'll make the effort to learn to use it, and people will support them to learn to use it, and this will continue. So I'm really hoping that a lot of this continues into the future. And working from home, maybe people will find that easier in the future. There's a lot of good to come from this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a silver lining, isn't it? And making sure that we're committed to bring the best of that however we come out of this, or partially come out of this. And I think you've already preempted my next question, but I suppose you've obviously had lots of plans, and how are you helping tackle social isolation with it now, given the situation? So it sounds like mostly online, but you can talk a little bit more about the letters as well. That sounds fascinating.
Sorry, about the what? I didn't catch that.
About the letters and postcards.
The letters. Oh, it's also human, this work. You make connections with people, you make friendships with people, and that doesn't go away just because you stop working in a certain place, or you keep in touch with people. And a lot of people had just got used to using text for the first time, so very often I'll get a lovely little text from someone asking how I'm doing, so I'm able to reply by text and send a little picture of the work that I'm doing on my house. Online also, I'm finding things like being able to make postcards with pictures that I've taken. It's very helpful for being in touch with somebody, because I can send a picture of, smiling at what I've just done, this wall I've just painted. It's just a nice little personal way to keep in touch with people, because that human connection is just so important, and relationships are everything in this line of work, really. It's not really about delivering a service, it's about getting to know somebody, finding out all about them, and hearing from them. And when they feel comfortable to open up about what they need, then that's really where you start working.
And that's the beautiful thing about the Deep Network is it's very much led by the users, the people with dementia themselves. And have you got any, as a facilitator, I guess, do you have any tips in terms of who you want to work with, someone with carers or people with dementia, in terms of using Zoom, for example?
Well, I think that the best resources really come from people themselves who have dementia. If you have a look at the Deep Network on social media, you'll see all the way through their posts that they actually share the resources that people make for themselves. So very clear, different aspects are covered in different tweets about different aspects of using Zoom, how to join if you've got a phone, how to use different aspects of it. But these are all created by people who have dementia. So it makes it very clear and very empowering, and actually led by the people who need the resources, which I think is the most important thing, really. A lot of my work is just facilitation. I don't come up with the ideas. I actually sort of make it happen that people can get together. I facilitate that, and then I support them to feel comfortable enough to share what it is that they need to say or are concerned about. And then we come up with plans for how to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was great to be invited to one of the groups, the alumni groups with Agnes, and I was there with Science Gaily hat, so I played a wee tune and got a sing along, which was interesting with the time lapse, with the time difference. Talked a wee bit about the research as well, and answer some questions about the different parts of the brain and that type of thing as well. And one of the things I really liked was they had the big kind of yellow postcard that they could print off, I believe, and and it says, "I would like to speak." Even something as simple as like that.
This started in the deep gatherings, and people who were going along were finding that they, just, when do I speak? Can I speak now? It's kind of like, do you put your hands up or what? But these are just very clear and easy to see because they're yellow and black. But that's also one of the clearest combinations to be able to see the words. But if you can imagine, I mean, if you're struggling to hold on to words that you want to say and they're going to escape from you quite quickly, you need to be able to say what you want to say while you're in the moment. So it's really important to have these cards to be able to say, hey, but equally online on Zoom chats, they're so helpful because, you can see immediately, oh yeah, you'd like to say something. And that's been so brilliant for Zoom. But also I learned something the other day when we were all on the Zoom call. It doesn't really work very well for an online choir, does it? Because
not so much.
Because it cuts one person out and then the main person gets to speak, and then everybody else is kind of silent. So it doesn't really work for an online choir. So I have to look for a different platform for that.
Yeah. We've done a few digital sessions, and it seems to work best when one person is playing and everyone else is on mute, and then everyone kind of can play along if you like. So you still get that effect, or you could pre-record someone else playing, and then someone else plays it and plays and records that. And it becomes a bit of a loop after a while, but then hopefully you get the benefit of that kind of connection at the very least.
It's a good learning, curve.
Yes, absolutely. It's really testing the boundaries. Have you got any other last bits of advice apart from, I think you've covered quite a lot of information there but in terms of social isolation, in terms of how people can get in touch perhaps with the Deep Network or find further resources? I think you've mentioned the link.
Yeah, I just wanted to say really that social isolation isn't new, is it? It's that we've been dealing with this all the time in communities, especially across Scotland. I mean, this situation is very different, but my approach in the past has always been to just go and see people where they are, and this situation has really sort of blown that out of the water. So we do have to be a lot more connected digitally and by post and that kind of thing, and that's where mobile libraries are just so important, because they can actually a very familiar resource and service and face to somebody, and actually deliver those things directly to them. Really important resources and books and choices, as Kathleen was saying. So that's massively important. But when I was working across the Western Isles, we just used community buildings and made use of partnership working and all of the local care centres, and wherever there's a space, we were using it to gather people and share and connect, and sharing evening classes and anything, performances, anything that we had the Scottish Opera in one of the care homes and the Scottish Ballet. Just whatever we could sort of pull together from the people that were visiting. We used to just go and perform and share wherever we could, but this is just such a different situation. But again, all of these companies are actually performing online, so there are ways to still connect people with that. It's just a different situation now, but social isolation is always going to be there, I think. We just have to take what we can learn from this and take it forward so that we're a little bit more connected in the future.
Nice, well put. Kathleen, yeah?
Yes, just thinking what you're saying, it's that so many places are now putting stuff online, and but I think people are getting sort of almost overwhelmed. There seems to be so much out there. So what we're trying to do is we've got a sort of library library page up, so called Your Lockdown Library, and we're trying to just sort of collate and promote some of these wonderful sort of resources like Scottish Ballet and the National Theatre and things like that. And I just hope that does continue after this, because it is so nice to make these resources available to people who will never have the opportunity to go and buy a ticket and be there unless they're on a sort of special trip. So hopefully these organizations will then continue to make what they do accessible to people. And at least then we can try and help. And just thank you, Paula, for sort of mentioning mobile libraries and that. And I think libraries are very trusted spaces, and the staff are trusted, and that's something, you know, we can build on, really.
Absolutely. I think it's a great report from Carnegie about the kindness.
Yeah, lovely.
Also, it's one of the highest, you know, most trusted spaces. And I guess, yeah, maybe to finish, the conversation will continue, of course, and the discussion. But I guess also, yeah, I think we're all seeing a lot of creativity around this challenge right now, and I think there are lots of new ways that people are connecting with people. You know, I live in a city, and all of a sudden, people like neighbours are talking to each other, and there are, you know, posts and, you know, things that which actually, you know, if you're in rural spaces, you take for granted, even just eye contact when you pass people on the street. So I think there's a real, you know, I think people are producing more things hopefully as well, and different types of culture, different types of ways of connecting, must in a way. So hopefully, if we can link that with everything else as well, we can really shine that spotlight and make connections. But I want to thank both of you for your time, and we'll see you in the discussion groups and in the Facebook group as we continue. But thanks again, once again, Kathleen and Paula.
Thank you.
Thank you.